I am Ethan, 32 years old. Just a few weeks ago, I stood completely frozen outside my own brother's house, listening to my flesh and blood gleefully wish for my death. While I was standing on the porch, holding a tray of food I had spent hours preparing just to impress them, my own father's voice rang out clear as a bell. He said, "It would be nice if there was an accident and he never showed up." He didn't say it with anger. He said it casually, like he was commenting on the weather. And the worst part? Dozens of my relatives, the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally, burst into a chorus of genuine, roaring laughter. They laughed at the thought of my lifeless body pulled from a car wreck. But there is one thing they didn't know. I wasn't just a naive punching bag anymore. I had my phone, I had a best friend with a serious medical background, and I had reached my absolute breaking point. I was about to execute a plan that would completely shatter their perfect, arrogant little world. And today, they are the ones leaving desperate voicemails, begging for a second chance. Before I tell you exactly what happened and how I served up the ultimate lesson in karma, please hit that like button if you believe that toxic family members need to be held accountable. And don't forget to let me know where you are watching from down in the comments. Your support means everything to me. Now, let's go back to the exact moment my entire world shattered, and how I built a new one from the pieces. It was a perfectly sunny Saturday afternoon in Phoenix. The kind of day where the sky is a brilliant, cloudless blue, and you feel like nothing could possibly go wrong. I arrived at my older brother Marcus's house 30 minutes early, which was completely out of character for me. Normally, I timed these massive family gatherings down to the exact minute. I would show up precisely when expected, plaster a fake smile on my face, and leave the second that basic politeness allowed. But today felt entirely different. Today I actually wanted to be early. I had incredible news to share. After years of grinding, of being the family disappointment, I had finally landed a massive promotion as the director of marketing for a major hospitality group. We are talking about a massive jump in salary, a full benefits package, a matching 401k, the works. For once in my 32 years of life, I thought maybe, just maybe, my family would look at me with pride. I thought my dad would finally clap me on the shoulder and say, "Good job, son." Marcus's house sits at the end of a very quiet, very wealthy cul-de-sac. It's a sprawling, custom-built estate with a manicured lawn that looks like it belongs on the cover of a magazine. His massive success in commercial real estate development had bought him this picture-perfect lifestyle, and believe me, he never missed a single opportunity to let everyone know it. I pulled my humble sedan into the long circular driveway at 4:25 p.m. I noticed that several luxury cars were already parked. I saw my cousin Lucas's brand new truck, my Aunt Vivian's sleek crossover, and a few others. I grabbed the massive tray of marinated brisket I had prepared, a recipe I spent all night perfecting, from the passenger seat and walked up the stone pathway toward the front door. The front door was unlocked, as it always was during these big family events. Marcus believed in keeping an open door for family, even though his heart had been firmly bolted shut to me for decades. The grand foyer was quiet, the marble floors reflecting the afternoon light. I could hear the muffled sounds of a crowd gathered in the massive backyard. The clinking of glasses, the smell of charcoal, the hum of conversation. I walked softly into the kitchen and set the brisket down on the granite island next to a dozen other side dishes. The kitchen window was wide open, looking directly out onto the patio. I was just about to push the screen door open and announce my arrival when I heard my name. "Ethan should be here soon," Marcus said. His voice carried effortlessly through the open window. He texted that he was coming early to help. I paused. My hand froze inches from the handle. There was something in Marcus's tone, a dripping, condescending sneer, that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. "Oh, fantastic," my Aunt Vivian replied, her voice dripping with pure venom. "I absolutely cannot wait to hear all about his glamorous new life." Laughter rippled through the group. It wasn't just a polite chuckle. It was a shared, mean-spirited cackle. I stood completely still, my heart starting to pound against my ribs. I recognized all the voices. My dad, my mom, my cousin Lucas, Aunt Vivian, Uncle Henry. My entire family was out there, having a grand old time tearing me to shreds. You know he's only coming to brag about his new job, Marcus continued, playing to his audience. Director of marketing at some hotel chain. He probably expects us all to roll out the red carpet, bow down, and worship his unbelievable success. More laughter. Louder this time. Remember when he was barely scraping by working at that coffee shop? Aunt Vivian chimed in, her voice shrill and delighted. Now suddenly he thinks he's better than all of us. He always did have delusions of grandeur. Even as a kid, he thought he was so special with his little art projects. My hand slowly fell away from the door handle. I felt the blood drain from my face. I was 32 years old, standing in a multi-million-dollar kitchen, feeling exactly like a worthless 7-year-old boy. And then my father spoke. Richard, the man whose approval I had chased like a starving dog my entire life. Honestly, my dad said, his voice casual, light, and completely devoid of empathy. It would be nice if there was an accident on the highway and he never showed up. A beat of silence. And then the group erupted. Real, genuine, full-throated amusement at the idea of me bleeding out on the asphalt. My mother, Eleanor, the woman who brought me into this world, didn't gasp. She didn't defend me. I heard her distinctive, nervous little giggle blending right in with the rest of them. I didn't confront them. I didn't push open the door and scream. My mind went blank, replaced by a cold, ringing numbness. I backed away from the kitchen window, moving silently across the marble floor. I left the brisket right there on the counter. Let them wonder where it came from. Let them think I had never arrived at all. I slipped out the front door, walked right past my car, and kept walking down the wealthy suburban street. Couldn't breathe. My chest was tight, my vision blurring with hot, angry tears that I absolutely refused to let fall. I had cried over these people for the last time. 2 blocks away, my phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Marcus. Where are you? Thought you were coming early to be useful for once. I stared at the screen. The sheer audacity. The absolute fakeness of it all. I didn't reply. Instead, I scrolled through my contacts until I found Sarah. Sarah had been my best friend since college. She was a former ER nurse, brilliant, fiercely loyal, and the only person who truly understood the depth of my family's toxicity. I hit call. She answered on the second ring. Hey, she said cheerfully. Shouldn't you be getting roasted at the annual barbecue right now? Sarah, I said, my voice eerily calm, devoid of all emotion. I need your help, and I need you to trust me. We are going to teach them a lesson they will never, ever forget. I thought the worst was over. I thought realizing my family hated me was the rock bottom. I was so incredibly wrong. The storm hadn't even started yet. To understand why I didn't just walk away, to understand why I needed to orchestrate something so extreme, you have to understand the 32 years of psychological warfare I survived in that family. You have to understand the shadow of the golden child. Marcus is 4 years older than me, but in my father's eyes, he might as well have been a god walking among mortals. Growing up, everything was a competition that I was rigged to lose. Marcus was the star quarterback, the straight-A student who went on to get a prestigious business degree. He was ruthless, charming in that aggressive corporate way, and a mirror image of my father, Richard. My dad is an old-school mechanical engineer. He values logic, money, real estate, and tangible power. If you can't build it with your hands or sell it for a massive profit, it has absolutely zero value to him. So, when I turned out to be a quiet kid who loved creative writing, graphic design, and marketing, I wasn't just different in his eyes. I was a defect. I was a profound disappointment. I vividly remember sitting at the dining room table when I was 16. I had just won a statewide creative writing competition. I brought the certificate home, practically vibrating with excitement. I placed it on the table right in front of my dad while he was reading the Wall Street Journal. He glanced at it for exactly 2 seconds. Writing? He scoffed, not even picking up the paper. What's the salary on a poem, Ethan? Are you going to pay a mortgage with metaphors? Look at your brother. He just landed an internship at a commercial real estate firm. That's a real future. This is just a distraction. He went back to his newspaper. My mother, Eleanor, was standing right there at the kitchen sink. She looked at me, gave a weak, pathetic little shrug, and turned back to scrubbing a pot. That was her signature move. Silent complicity. She never threw the punch, but she always held me down so my dad and Marcus could land the hits. She worshipped the ground my dad walked on, and she would sacrifice my mental health every single day of the week to keep the peace in her house. When Marcus went to college, my parents liquidated a massive chunk of their investments to pay his tuition in full. When it was my turn, my dad sat me down and handed me a stack of student loan applications. "I'm not wasting the college fund on an arts degree," he stated flatly. "If you want to study marketing and drawing, you can finance it yourself. Consider it a lesson in the real world." I took out the loans. I worked 2 jobs, one at a coffee shop opening at 4:30 a.m. and another in a retail stockroom late at night. I clawed my way through college, paying for every textbook, every meal, every credit hour. When I finally graduated, I invited the whole family to the ceremony. I was so proud. I had survived. Nobody showed up. Not one of them. I sat in the auditorium looking up at the empty bleachers, watching other families cheer and hold up signs. Later that afternoon, I found out why. Marcus had just closed his first big commercial real estate deal. To celebrate, my dad had taken the entire family to a luxury car dealership to co-sign the lease on Marcus's first Porsche. My college graduation, a milestone I paid for with my own blood, sweat, and tears, was entirely eclipsed by my brother buying a car. And then there was Aunt Vivian. If my dad was the hammer, Aunt Vivian was the poison. She is my dad's older sister, a wealthy, bitter widow who practically treats family gatherings as her personal theater of cruelty. She always had this sick need to establish a pecking order. Every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, every 4th of July, she would corner me. "Still living in that tiny apartment, Ethan?" she would ask loudly, making sure the whole room could hear. "Marcus just bought a 5-bedroom house. But I suppose you don't need much space for your little projects." It wasn't just the words. It was the absolute normalization of the abuse. If I ever defended myself, if I ever showed an ounce of hurt, the entire family would turn on me like a pack of wolves. "Oh, stop being so sensitive, Ethan." My mother would sigh, rolling her eyes. "You're too emotional," my dad would bark. "You need to man up. It's just a joke." It is a terrifying thing when the people who are supposed to protect you gaslight you into believing that their cruelty is actually your personality flaw. I spent my entire 20s believing there was something inherently wrong with me. I dated women who treated me poorly because I thought that was the kind of love I deserved. I accepted low-paying jobs because my family had convinced me I wasn't capable of anything greater. But slowly, painfully, I started to rebuild my self-worth. I found a brilliant mentor named David at a mid-level advertising firm. David looked at my portfolio and didn't see a disappointment. He saw raw talent. For the first time in my life, someone believed in me. Under his guidance, I worked like a machine. I learned market analytics, digital strategy, consumer psychology. I climbed the ladder rung by brutal rung. And then it happened. 3 weeks before that fateful barbecue, I got the call. Sunset Hospitality Group, a massive conglomerate, was looking for a new director of marketing. I went through 5 grueling rounds of interviews with the CEO, a razor-sharp woman named Catherine. At the end of the final interview, she slid an offer letter across the mahogany desk. A 6-figure salary, a massive budget to control, a team of 20 people reporting directly to me. When I saw the numbers on that contract, I had to excuse myself to the restroom so I could lock myself in a stall and cry. I had made it. I had proven them all wrong. The little boy who was told he would never amount to anything was now sitting at the executive table. I was so naive. God, I was so incredibly stupid. Instead of taking that victory and walking away, my deeply ingrained trauma kicked in. The inner child inside of me saw that offer letter as the ultimate golden ticket. I thought to myself, this is it. This is the proof. When Dad hears about the salary, when Marcus hears about my corporate title, they will finally respect me. I RSVP'd to Marcus's barbecue with actual excitement. I spent 3 days planning what I would say. I bought a new shirt. I marinated that stupid brisket for 24 hours because I knew my dad loved it. I drove to that house in the wealthy suburbs with a heart full of desperate, pathetic hope. And what was my reward? Standing outside a kitchen window, listening to the man who gave me his name say it would be nice if I died in a car crash. Listening to my mother laugh at the concept. Listening to my brother mock the very career milestone I thought would finally make him view me as an equal. As I sat in the corner booth of a quiet coffee shop 3 miles away from the barbecue, staring at my best friend Sarah, the last remnants of that desperate little boy completely evaporated. The sadness didn't just fade. It calcified into something hard, cold, and razor-sharp. Sarah slid into the booth across from me. Her brow was furrowed in deep concern. "Ethan, you look like a ghost. What happened? You said it was an emergency." I took a breath, and I told her everything. Every single word I had overheard. The tone of my dad's voice. The exact pitch of Aunt Vivian's laughter. The text Marcus had just sent me, pretending to care while actively destroying my character to a crowd of our relatives. By the time I finished, Sarah's hands were balled into tight fists on the table. Her eyes were blazing. "I am going to drive over there right now," Sarah said, her voice dropping to a lethal whisper. "I am going to walk into that backyard, flip over the grill, and tell every single one of those miserable sociopaths exactly what they are." "No," I said quietly. My own voice surprised me. It was so steady. "Screaming at them won't do anything. They'll just call me dramatic. They'll tell you you're crazy. They will spin the narrative like they always do. Then what, Ethan? You're just going to cut them off? Ghost them?" "I am going to cut them off," I replied, leaning across the table. "But first I am going to give them exactly what they asked for. They wanted a tragedy. They wanted to imagine what it would be like if I never showed up. We are going to show them. And Sarah, I need your ER voice." Sarah's eyes widened as she realized exactly what I was asking her to do. The wheels in her head started turning, and the storm was finally unleashed. "You want me to fake a hospital call?" Sarah asked, her voice hushed, looking around the coffee shop to make sure no one was listening. "Ethan, that is nuclear. If we do this, there is no going back. Ever." "I don't want to go back," I said, staring directly into her eyes. "Look at me, Sarah. I am 32 years old. I have spent my entire existence bending over backwards for a family that uses my pain for entertainment. They literally joked about me dying in an accident. I want them to feel the sheer terror of that reality, even if it's just for 20 minutes. I want them to face the absolute finality of their own cruelty." Sarah stared at me for a long, heavy moment. She had been the one to pick me up off the floor when I had panic attacks in college. She had been the one to help me draft emails to my parents when they forgot my birthday 3 years in a row. She knew the depth of the rot. Slowly, a fierce, determined look settled over her features. She pulled her phone out of her purse and placed it on the table. "Okay," she said, her tone shifting into pure professionalism. "If we are doing this, we do it flawlessly. We don't leave room for them to doubt it. We need specific medical terminology. We need urgency. And we need to target the weakest link." "My mother," I said instantly. "If you call Marcus, he'll be suspicious and ask too many logical questions. If you call my dad, he might not even care enough to leave the grill. But my mother, she operates entirely on public perception and panic. If you call her, she will scream, and the entire party will be forced to react." "Perfect," Sarah said. "Give me her number. I'm going to block my caller ID so it shows up as unknown or private." While Sarah was punching in the numbers, my phone buzzed on the table. It was a text from my cousin Lucas. Lucas was the guy who always played the peacemaker in the family. He would always pull me aside at parties and say, "Hey man, you know how your dad is. Just ignore him. I used to think Lucas was on my side. I looked at the text. Hey man, where are you? Uncle Richard is getting grumpy. You know how he hates when people are late. Just wanted to give you a heads up. A bitter laugh escaped my lips. Lucas was sitting right there. He had heard my dad wish death upon me. He had heard Aunt Vivian mock my career. He didn't defend me. He didn't tell them to stop. He sat there, complicit, and then had the absolute nerve to text me, pretending to be my buddy while simultaneously blaming me for making my dad grumpy, because I was late. He's a coward, I muttered, showing the screen to Sarah. They're all cowards. Let's give them something to be terrified of, Sarah said. She cleared her throat, closed her eyes for a second, and when she opened them, she wasn't Sarah, my best friend, anymore. She was Nurse Sarah from the trauma unit. I had heard her use this voice before when she dealt with difficult patients. It was authoritative, clinical, and completely devoid of warmth. It was exactly 5:10 p.m. The barbecue would be in full swing. The steaks would be on the grill. The wine would be flowing. Sarah pressed the call button and put it on speaker, turning the volume down so it wouldn't echo in the coffee shop. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Hello? My mother's voice came through the speaker. She sounded slightly breathless, annoyed that her socializing was being interrupted. In the background, I could hear the upbeat country music Marcus always played at his parties. Hello? Is this Eleanor? Sarah asked, her voice crisp and urgent. Yes, this is she. Who is calling? Eleanor. My name is Jessica. I am a charge nurse calling from the emergency department at Phoenix General Hospital. I am trying to reach the emergency contact for an Ethan. The country music in the background seemed to suddenly drop in volume. Ethan? Yes, I'm his mother. What's going on? Is he all right? Ma'am, I need you to listen to me carefully, Sarah said, expertly injecting a grim severity into her tone. Your son was brought in by ambulance roughly 20 minutes ago. He was involved in a severe multi-vehicle collision on Interstate 10. His vehicle was T-boned at high speed. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. Oh my God. What do you mean? My mother's voice began to tremble. His condition is critical, Sarah continued flawlessly, not missing a beat. He has sustained blunt force trauma to the chest and severe cranial hemorrhaging. The trauma surgeons are currently stabilizing him for emergency surgery, but his vitals are highly unstable. We need next of kin here immediately. Suddenly, the background noise on the phone completely died. The music was cut off. I could hear Marcus's voice in the distance asking, Mom? Mom, what's wrong? Oh my God. Richard, come here, my mother shrieked. The sound of a glass dropping and shattering against the patio pavers echoed clearly through the speaker. It was a beautiful, terrible sound. My son. Where is he? Phoenix General? We're coming. We're coming right now. Please come directly to the main emergency entrance and ask the front desk for Trauma Bay 3, Sarah instructed coldly. Please hurry, ma'am. Time is a critical factor right now. Sarah hung up the phone. The silence at our table was deafening. We just sat there, staring at the black screen of the phone. My heart was thumping against my ribcage like a trapped bird. It's done, Sarah whispered, letting out a massive breath she had been holding. Ethan. She sounded terrified. They bought it. They bought it completely. I leaned back against the booth, running my trembling hands over my face. I expected to feel guilty. I expected the ingrained, people-pleasing part of my brain to scream at me to call them back, to apologize, to tell them it was just a prank. But I felt absolutely nothing. No guilt, no remorse, just a cold, dark sense of justice settling over my bones. They asked for an accident, I said quietly, looking out the coffee shop window. Now they get to live it. What's the next move? Sarah asked, packing her phone into her purse. We go to the hospital, I said, standing up and throwing a $20 bill on the table. I want to see it. I want to see the exact look on my father's face when he realizes that his wish came true. And then, I want to see his face when he realizes I caught him. We left the coffee shop and drove in Sarah's car, leaving my sedan parked behind a nearby strip mall. Phoenix General Hospital was only a 10-minute drive from Marcus's neighborhood. We navigated through the early evening traffic, the sun beginning to dip lower in the sky, casting long, dramatic shadows across the pavement. When we arrived, Sarah drove straight past the emergency room entrance and pulled into the massive, multi-level parking garage directly across the street. We drove up to the third floor, parking nose in facing the hospital. From our vantage point, we had a perfect, unobstructed view of the brightly lit ER sliding doors, the ambulance bay, and the patient drop-off zone. I rolled down the window, letting the warm desert evening air flow into the car. I rested my elbows on the door frame. It was 5:25 p.m. Only 15 minutes had passed since the phone call. And then, my phone began to vibrate. It vibrated so continuously it felt like a single, endless buzz. I looked down at the screen. The notifications were flooding in like a tsunami. Missed call, Dad. Missed call, Marcus. Missed call, Marcus. Text from Aunt Vivian. Ethan, please God tell me you are okay, we are on our way to the hospital. Text from Lucas. Dude, we are freaking out, please answer your phone. I didn't open a single one. I simply placed the phone face up on the dashboard and watched the screen light up over and over again. You're shaking, Sarah noted softly from the driver's seat. I'm not scared, I replied, my eyes fixed on the hospital entrance below. I'm just waiting for the storm to hit. And right on cue, the storm arrived. I heard the screeching of tires before I saw the vehicle. Marcus's black Porsche SUV came careening around the corner of the hospital complex, taking the turn so fast the tires smoked. He didn't even bother pulling into a parking spot. He slammed on the brakes right in the middle of the red emergency drop-off zone, blocking an empty ambulance lane. The doors flew open. My father, Richard, was the first one out. I had never, in my 32 years of life, seen my father run. He was a man who walked with deliberate, heavy steps, always projecting total control. But right now, he was sprinting. He left the car door wide open and bolted toward the sliding glass doors, his face pale, his posture frantic. My mother stumbled out of the passenger side, clutching her chest, practically being held up by Marcus, who looked completely unhinged. Behind them, 2 more cars screeched to a halt. Aunt Vivian, Uncle Henry, Lucas, and Marcus's wife, Qley, all poured out, swarming toward the entrance like a hive of panicked bees. I sat there in the quiet safety of the third-floor parking garage, watching my family absolutely unravel over the prospect of losing the very person they had been mocking just half an hour ago. I thought seeing them panic would bring me joy, but as I watched them disappear through the automatic doors, a profound, suffocating sadness washed over me. This is what it took. It took the literal threat of my death to make them show an ounce of urgency for my existence. I was about to detonate a bomb on my family tree, and there was no turning back now. The interior of Sarah's car was dead silent, save for the relentless, rhythmic buzzing of my phone vibrating against the hard plastic of the dashboard. Every buzz was another missed call, another panic text message, another desperate plea from a family member who had suddenly discovered my value. Down below, the emergency room entrance was quiet again. The Porsche sat abandoned in the red zone, its hazard lights blinking rhythmically, casting an eerie orange glow against the concrete pillars. A security guard walked out, inspected the illegally parked luxury SUV, shook his head, and pulled out a ticket pad. Even in the midst of a fabricated family tragedy, Marcus's arrogant disregard for the rules was on full display. How long do we let them suffer? Sarah asked, her voice low. She was leaning forward over the steering wheel, her eyes locked on the sliding glass doors. Until the panic turns to confusion, I replied, my voice steady, though my hands were clamped together so tightly my knuckles were bone white. Right now, they are at the front desk. They are screaming my name. The triage nurse is frantically typing into the database, trying to find a John Doe or an Ethan matching my description. It will take them at least 20 minutes to realize that I'm not in surgery. I'm not in Trauma Bay 3, and I was never brought in by an ambulance. We sat in the heavy, suffocating silence of the parking garage, watching the digital clock on the dashboard tick away the minutes. 5:35 p.m. My mother called 3 times in a row. 5:40 p.m. A text from my father. Ethan, if you are reading this, hold on. We are here. Dad is here. I read the text out loud, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. Dad is here. I let out a harsh, bitter laugh that echoed sharply in the small confines of the car. He's here, I said to Sarah, shaking my head. 32 years of begging for his attention. 32 years of art shows he skipped, graduations he ignored, promotions he belittled. And all it took for him to finally show up was a massive cranial hemorrhage. It's sick, Ethan, Sarah agreed, her tone laced with disgust. It just proves that their cruelty is a choice. They are completely capable of caring. They just actively chose to withhold it from you as a power play. She was exactly right. That was the realization that finally killed the last lingering ounce of guilt I had about this plan. This wasn't about a lack of capacity for love. My dad loved Marcus. He proved it every time he praised his real estate deals, every time he funded his life. My parents' treatment of me wasn't an accident. It was a systematic, deliberate execution of favoritism. They needed a scapegoat to make the golden child shine brighter, and I was drafted into the role without my consent. 5:45 p.m. Down below, the sliding glass doors of the ER hissed open. My cousin Lucas walked out, a phone pressed tightly to his ear. He was pacing back and forth on the sidewalk, gesturing wildly with his free hand. A moment later, my phone vibrated. Missed call, Lucas. I watched him end the call, run a hand through his hair in frustration, and walk back inside. They were starting to figure it out. The hospital staff would be telling them firmly that there was no record of my admission. The panic of loss was beginning to curdle into the chaotic confusion of a mystery. Any minute now, I murmured, never taking my eyes off the entrance. I thought about what I was about to do. I was about to sever ties with my entire bloodline. In American culture, family is pushed as this unbreakable, sacred bond. Family is everything, they say. Blood is thicker than water. But nobody ever talks about what you're supposed to do when your blood is the exact thing poisoning you. Nobody talks about the immense, terrifying grief of attending a funeral for people who are still alive, mourning the parents you deserved but never actually had. I was grieving, sitting in that parking garage, watching the sunset reflect off the hospital windows. I was holding a funeral for the little boy who just wanted his dad to be proud of him. I was burying him here today. 5:55 p.m. The doors flew open again. This time it was a mass exodus. Marcus led the charge, storming out of the hospital with his phone glued to his face. His expression twisted into a mask of pure, unadulterated fury. Behind him, my father looked completely disoriented. My mother was leaning heavily on Aunt Vivian, dabbing at her face with a tissue. Even from 3 stories up, I could feel the aggressive, frantic energy radiating from Marcus. He was marching toward his ticketed Porsche, looking frantically up and down the street as if I was going to magically appear from the bushes. My phone lit up. The screen flashed with a photo of Marcus and me from 5 years ago. A photo where he had his arm around my neck in a chokehold that was a little too tight to be playful. Incoming call, Marcus. I didn't decline it. I let it ring. I watched him from above, pacing next to his car, kicking the tires in frustration. Are you going to answer it? Sarah asked, her breathing hitching slightly in anticipation. Not yet, I said. Let him leave a voicemail. Let him put his confusion on the record. The call went to voicemail. I waited 30 seconds. Marcus immediately dialed again. He was relentless. He wasn't operating out of love anymore. He was operating out of a need to control the situation. He couldn't stand not knowing what was happening. I picked up the phone. I took one deep, stabilizing breath, filling my lungs with the warm Arizona air. I looked at Sarah, gave her a single, firm nod, and swiped the green button to accept the call. I didn't say a word. I just brought the phone to my ear and listened. Ethan? Marcus's voice exploded through the speaker. So loud and frantic I had to pull the phone an inch away from my ear. Ethan, where the hell are you? Are you alive? The hospital says you aren't here. They say there hasn't been a multi-car accident on I-10. Where are you? What is going on? I looked down through the windshield. I could see him perfectly. I could see my father standing behind him, leaning in closely to try and hear my voice through the receiver. I had the high ground, literally and figuratively. I'm perfectly fine, Marcus, I said. My voice was calm, dangerously, terrifyingly calm. It didn't shake. It didn't waver. It was the voice of a CEO closing a hostile takeover. There was a stunned, heavy silence on the other end of the line. The sheer contrast between his frantic screaming and my icy composure was a physical blow. You're fine, Marcus stammered, the anger temporarily derailed by shock. We got a call. Mom got a call from a trauma nurse. They said you had a brain hemorrhage. They said you were dying. Did they? I asked, my tone dripping with feigned innocence. That is incredibly strange. Where are you? He demanded, the fury rapidly returning to his voice. Are you at another hospital? Did they transfer you? No, Marcus, I said, leaning forward. My eyes locked on his tiny figure 3 stories below. I'm not at a hospital. I haven't been in an accident. Then where the hell are you? I paused. I let the silence stretch out, savoring the exact moment the power dynamic of our entire lives permanently shifted. I'm sitting in the 3rd-floor parking garage directly across the street from you, I said clearly. I've been sitting here for the last 45 minutes, watching you all run around like lab rats in a maze. I watched Marcus freeze. Down below, he slowly pulled the phone away from his ear, turned his head, and looked up at the massive concrete structure of the parking garage. I knew he couldn't see my face through the tinted windshield, but I knew he could feel me looking down at him. The storm had officially made landfall, and I was standing right in the eye of it. You did this on purpose, Marcus said. His voice was no longer frantic. It had dropped an octave, turning into a low, dangerous growl. The panic of losing a brother had instantly evaporated, replaced entirely by the rage of a man who realized he had been played. You made us think you were dying, you sick, twisted piece of work. Do you have any idea what you just put Mom through? I know exactly what I put her through, I replied. The air in the car felt incredibly still. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I gave her exactly 45 minutes of terror. Which is interesting, Marcus, considering you and Dad were just joking about how convenient my death would be. I figured I would do the family a favor and let you test drive the experience. There was a scuffling sound on the other end of the line. A heavy, aggressive rustling, followed by my father's booming voice hijacking the receiver. Ethan, what the hell is wrong with you? My dad roared. His voice was the soundtrack of my childhood nightmares. It was the voice that used to make me shrink into the floorboards, the voice that dictated the mood of our entire household. You get down here right now. You apologize to your mother. You are going to march into this hospital, look these doctors in the eye, and apologize for wasting their time. This is the most immature, pathetic stunt you have ever pulled. A year ago, a month ago, even a week ago, that voice would have triggered a visceral reaction. My stomach would have dropped. My palms would have started sweating. I would have instantly reverted to that desperate, approval-seeking little boy, scrambling to find the right words to appease his wrath. But as I sat in the passenger seat of Sarah's car, looking down at him, I felt absolutely nothing but a profound, clinical detachment. He wasn't a terrifying giant anymore. He was just an angry, aging man standing in a parking lot, entirely out of control. I am not apologizing for anything, Richard, I said. It was the first time in my 32 years of life that I had addressed my father by his first name. The silence that followed was absolute. I could practically hear the shockwaves rippling through the phone. Excuse me? He snarled, though there was a slight hesitation in his delivery now. I arrived at the house at 4:25, I said, speaking slowly. enunciating every single word so there could be no misunderstanding. I walked into the kitchen. I put my brisket on the granite island. And then I stood by the open window and listened to you all tear me apart. I heard Marcus say I was only coming to brag. I heard Aunt Vivian mock my career. I heard you say it would be nice if there was an accident and I never showed up. And I heard every single one of you laugh. We were joking, my father yelled defensively. It is the classic anthem of the abuser. Whenever they are caught, whenever their cruelty is dragged into the light, it is always suddenly framed as a joke. It was family banter. You have always been too sensitive. You take everything so personally, Ethan. You need to grow a thicker skin. Family banter doesn't involve wishing death upon your own son, I countered effortlessly. It wasn't a joke. It was the truth. It was the ugly, unfiltered truth of how this family operates. You all use me as a punching bag to make yourselves feel superior. Marcus needs me to be a failure so he can feel like a success. You need me to be a disappointment so you can justify pouring all your resources into your golden child. And Aunt Vivian just needs someone to hate because her own life is utterly devoid of joy. Don't you dare speak about your aunt that way. My mother's voice shrieked in the background. She had managed to pry herself close enough to the phone to inject her usual dose of toxic compliance. Ethan, please just come down here. Let's go back to the house and talk about this like adults. We can fix this. You are ruining the family gathering. I'm not ruining anything, Mom. I'm leaving it, I said, leaning back into the car seat. I am stepping off the treadmill. I am done trying to earn a place at a table where I am only served disrespect. You don't have to worry about me being too sensitive anymore. You don't have to worry about me ruining your parties with my delusions of grandeur. You have your perfect son right there next to you. Ethan, listen to me. Marcus started. No, you listen to me. I cut him off, my voice turning to steel. There is a tray of marinated brisket on your kitchen counter. Took me 12 hours to prep. Consider it my parting gift. Eat it, throw it away, I don't care. Do not call me again. Do not text me. If you show up at my apartment, I will call the police and have you trespassed. Have a wonderful life. I pulled the phone away from my ear, hit the red end call button, and immediately powered the device off. I didn't stop there. I popped the SIM card tray open with a paperclip Sarah handed me, pulled the tiny chip out, and snapped it in half between my thumb and forefinger. I tossed the broken pieces out the car window. They fluttered down into the dark abyss of the parking garage. Let's pause for a moment. Thank you for staying with me this far, you're truly amazing. Please help me by liking the video and commenting the number 1 below so I know you've been here with me until this point. This not only helps more people discover this story, but also lets me know that my experiences mean something to someone. Your support is the greatest motivation for me to keep sharing the rest of this journey. Sarah put the car in drive and we slowly navigated our way out of the parking structure. We drove in silence for a long time. The adrenaline that had been carrying me through the afternoon began to recede, leaving behind a deep, bone-weary exhaustion. But underneath that exhaustion was a tiny, glowing ember of pure freedom. I had done it. I had survived the confrontation. I had walked through the fire and I had burned the bridge behind me. The next morning, Monday, marked my first official day as the director of marketing at Sunset Hospitality Group. I walked into the massive glass and steel corporate headquarters downtown, wearing a sharp navy suit I had bought specifically for this occasion. Without the constant, draining background noise of my family's drama, my mind felt incredibly sharp. I didn't have to check my phone to see if my dad had criticized my weekend plans. I didn't have to navigate a passive-aggressive group chat. For the first time, all of my mental energy belonged entirely to me. I met my new assistant, a sharp, energetic guy named Tyler, who immediately handed me a tablet with my schedule and a cup of black coffee. I walked into my corner office. It had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the entire Phoenix skyline. I stood there looking out over the city where my family was currently scrambling to figure out how to handle my absence, and I felt a surge of unbreakable confidence. At 2 o'clock that afternoon, I had my first major presentation with Catherine, the CEO. Catherine was a formidable woman in her late 50s, known throughout the industry for her ruthless efficiency and brilliant strategic mind. She didn't suffer fools, and she didn't care about your background. She only cared about your results. I walked into the executive boardroom, connected my laptop to the projector, and laid out a comprehensive, data-driven digital marketing strategy aimed at restructuring our loyalty program. I didn't stutter. I didn't second-guess myself. I commanded the room with the exact same icy authority I had used to shut down my brother the day before. When I finished the pitch and turned the projector off, the room was silent. Catherine sat at the head of the table, tapping a silver pen against her leather portfolio. She looked at me for a long, calculating moment. "Ethan," she said, her tone completely unreadable. "That was exceptional. The demographic targeting in the second phase is exactly the kind of aggressive restructuring this company has been lacking. You have full approval on the budget. Execute it." A wave of professional validation washed over me. This was what real respect looked like. It wasn't granted because of bloodline or birth order. It was earned through competence and hard work. As I packed up my laptop, Catherine held up a hand, gesturing for me to stay a moment after the other executives filed out. "I have a good instinct for people," Catherine said, leaning back in her chair. "When I interviewed you, I saw someone hungry, but today I saw someone lethal. Whatever shifted in your life over the weekend, keep it. It suits you." I thanked her, shook her hand, and walked out of the boardroom feeling 10 feet tall. I was building a new life, a fortress of my own making, completely immune to the toxic arrows of my past. But as the week dragged on, I learned a very harsh lesson about toxic families. They never just let you walk away. When they lose their scapegoat, the entire ecosystem of their dysfunction collapses. They need you back, not because they love you, but because they need someone to absorb their poison. I thought the silence was a victory. I didn't realize it was just them reloading. I bought a new phone and a new number on Tuesday. I only gave it to Sarah, my new employer, and David, my old mentor. I needed a completely clean slate. But by Thursday, the perimeter was breached. I was sitting in my office reviewing a campaign budget when Tyler knocked on the glass door. He looked slightly uncomfortable. "Hey, Ethan," Tyler said, stepping into the office. "There is a woman down in the main lobby asking for you. She says she's your mother. Security won't let her up without your authorization, but she is causing a bit of a scene. She's crying near the reception desk." My stomach tightened. The fortress walls rattled. Eleanor. My mother had never once visited me at any of my previous jobs. When I worked at the coffee shop, it was too blue-collar for her to be seen at. When I worked at the advertising agency, she claimed downtown traffic was too stressful. But now, when she needed to drag me back into the family cult, she somehow found the courage to navigate the city center. "Bring her up, Tyler," I said, adjusting my tie. "But tell security to keep her visitor badge restricted to this floor. And Tyler, do not leave your desk. If I ask you to escort her out, I need you to do it immediately." 5 minutes later, the heavy glass door to my office opened, and my mother walked in. She looked completely out of place in the sleek, ultra-modern corporate environment. She was wearing her Sunday church clothes, clutching her designer handbag tightly against her chest. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her face drawn. She looked around my expansive corner office, taking in the mahogany desk, the leather chairs, the panoramic view. For a second, a flash of genuine surprise crossed her face, before it settled back into a mask of maternal suffering. "Ethan," she breathed, taking a step toward me. "Have a seat, Eleanor," I said, gesturing to the chair across from my desk. I didn't stand up to hug her. I didn't offer her water. I maintained total professional distance. She sat down nervously, perching on the edge of the leather cushion. "You changed your number. We have been worried sick. Your father hasn't slept in days. Marcus is a wreck." "I seriously doubt that," I replied evenly, resting my hands flat on my desk. "Why are you here?" "I came to ask you to stop this nonsense," she pleaded, leaning forward, her voice taking on that whining, desperate pitch she used whenever my dad was in a bad mood. "Ethan, you proved your point. You scared us. You got your revenge. But now it's time to come home. Your father is furious, and the longer you drag this out, the harder it will be for him to forgive you." I stared at her. The sheer audacity of her logic was breathtaking. "Forgive me?" I asked, my voice dangerously soft. "You think I need his forgiveness? You humiliated him," she cried out, tears spilling over her eyelashes. "You made a fool out of him in front of Vivian and Henry and Lucas. You know how much pride he has. He is your father, Ethan. You only get one family. You need to call him, apologize for the hospital stunt, and we can sweep this whole ugly business under the rug. Please, Ethan. You are breaking your father's heart." I looked at the woman sitting across from me. For years, I had convinced myself that my mother was a victim too. I thought she was just too weak to stand up to my dad. But sitting here, listening to her demand that I apologize to my abuser just to make her life easier, the final illusion shattered. She wasn't a victim. She was an accomplice. She was the manager of the abuse, keeping the machinery running smoothly by demanding I lay down and take the beatings. "No," I said simply. "Ethan, please, be reasonable." I said no. I cut her off, my voice echoing slightly in the large office. "I am not apologizing to a man who wished for my death. I am not sweeping anything under the rug. The only reason you are here is because without me around to take the abuse, Dad has probably turned his anger onto you and Marcus. You don't miss me, Mom. You miss your human shield." She gasped, her hand flying to her chest as if I had struck her. "How can you say such a terrible thing to your own mother?" "Because it is the truth. And the truth is no longer banned in my life," I said, standing up from my chair. "Tyler!" The door opened instantly. Tyler stood there, professional and alert. "Please escort my mother to the elevators," I said, never breaking eye contact with her. She was just leaving. Eleanor stood up, her face flushing a deep, embarrassed red. She looked at me, realizing for the first time that the guilt trips no longer worked. The umbilical cord of manipulation had been severed. She turned on her heel and walked out, her designer bag swinging aggressively against her side. I thought that would be the end of it. I thought rejecting my mother would send a clear enough message to the rest of them. But I had vastly underestimated the absolute chaos I had unleashed upon Marcus's life. 2 weeks later, the real twist happened. The kind of poetic justice that is so perfect you couldn't script it if you tried. I received an email at my work address. It was from Marcus. It didn't contain any threats. It didn't contain any arrogant demands. It was just one sentence. "I need to see you. Please, meet me at the Oak Room downtown at 6 p.m. I'm begging you." The Oak Room was a high-end, dimly lit whiskey bar frequented by corporate executives and real estate developers. It was Marcus's usual stomping ground. I debated ignoring it, but my curiosity won out. I wanted to see the golden child beg. When I arrived at the bar, I almost didn't recognize my brother. Marcus was sitting in a dark leather booth in the back corner. He wasn't wearing his usual perfectly tailored Armani suit. He was wearing a wrinkled button-down shirt. He looked like he hadn't shaved in days. He had a glass of neat whiskey in front of him, and his hands were physically shaking. I slid into the booth across from him. I didn't order a drink. He looked up at me. His eyes were bloodshot, completely stripped of their usual arrogance. "You ruined me," he whispered. "It wasn't an accusation. It was a statement of fact." "I haven't spoken to you in 3 weeks, Marcus," I replied coldly. "I haven't done anything to you." "The Harrison contract," he said, taking a shaky gulp of his whiskey. "A $40 million commercial development deal in Scottsdale. I worked on it for 8 months. It was the crown jewel of my firm. We were supposed to sign the final papers on Monday. And," I prompted, feeling a strange tightening in my chest. "The primary investor pulled out," Marcus said, his voice cracking. "A woman named Evelyn Harrison. She killed the deal. She called my managing partner directly, and told him she refuses to do business with our firm as long as I am attached to the project. Business deals fall through all the time. What does this have to do with me? Marcus let out a miserable, self-deprecating laugh. He reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and slid it across the table. Evelyn Harrison, Marcus said, pointing at the screen, is best friends with Catherine, your CEO. I stared at the phone. My mind raced, connecting the dots with lightning speed. Catherine, the formidable CEO who told me she had a good instinct for people. The woman who noticed my shift in demeanor. According to my partner, Marcus continued, his voice hollow, Evelyn and Catherine play golf every Sunday at the Biltmore Country Club. Apparently, the Sunday after our barbecue, Catherine was talking about her brilliant new marketing director. She mentioned your name. Evelyn recognized the last name. She mentioned she was doing a massive real estate deal with my firm. I sat perfectly still, absorbing the information. And then, Marcus swallowed hard. Evelyn mentioned she was at the Biltmore the previous weekend, sitting on the patio, right next to the table where Aunt Vivian and Mom were having brunch. A cold, brilliant light dawned in my brain. Aunt Vivian and my mother always went to the Biltmore for Sunday brunch to gossip. They were talking about the hospital incident, Marcus whispered, burying his face in his hands. Aunt Vivian was complaining loudly to Mom about how you humiliated the family. She was recounting the entire story. She repeated what Dad said about the car crash. She repeated what I said about you being a failure. She bragged about how they put you in your place. Evelyn Harrison sat at the next table and heard every single word. I leaned back against the leather booth. The sheer, magnificent gravity of karma was unfolding right in front of my eyes. Evelyn called Catherine to confirm, Marcus said, looking up at me with tears in his eyes. And then Evelyn killed my deal. She told my partner that any man who finds joy in the psychological torture of his own flesh and blood, any man who laughs at the thought of his brother dying, lacks the fundamental moral integrity required to handle a $40 million investment. My firm is furious. I'm being placed on administrative leave pending an ethics review. My career is completely over, Ethan. He looked at me, a desperate, broken man, the golden child, completely stripped of his gold, sitting in the ashes of an empire built on arrogance. I thought about the tears I cried in my car when he mocked my promotion. I thought about the decades of being told I was nothing. I didn't ruin you, Marcus, I said softly, standing up from the booth. You ruined yourself. Aunt Vivian just handed Evelyn the microphone. I walked out of the oak room, leaving him sitting in the dark. The twist was complete, and the final collapse of the villains was about to begin. The fallout from the Harrison contract collapse was catastrophic for my family's toxic ecosystem. When the golden child falls, the entire foundation shatters. 2 days after my meeting with Marcus, the ambush happened. I was walking out of my luxury apartment building, heading toward my car to drive to the office. The morning air was crisp, the Arizona sun just beginning to heat the pavement. As I stepped onto the sidewalk, a large, imposing figure stepped out from behind a parked SUV, blocking my path. It was my father, and standing right behind him, clutching her expensive silk scarf like a shield, was Aunt Vivian. Richard looked completely unhinged. His face was a mottled, furious red. The veins in his neck were bulging against the collar of his polo shirt. He didn't look like a patriarch anymore. He looked like a desperate man losing his grip on reality. You vindictive little bastard, my father roared. His voice echoed off the concrete walls of the apartment complex, causing a woman walking her dog across the street to stop and stare. Are you happy now? Are you satisfied? You destroyed your brother's life. I stopped walking. I didn't flinch. I didn't step back. I squared my shoulders, looking him dead in the eye. I was a few inches taller than him now, a physical reality he seemed to suddenly realize as he had to tilt his head slightly upward to glare at me. Marcus lost his contract because he lacks character. Richard, I said, my voice projecting clearly and calmly over his shouting. He lost his contract because a billionaire investor heard your sister bragging in a public country club about how incredibly abusive this family is. I didn't make Aunt Vivian run her mouth. I didn't make you wish I was dead. Actions have consequences. Welcome to the real world. How dare you? Aunt Vivian shrieked, stepping out from behind my father. Her face was twisted into a mask of pure, venomous hatred. We gave you everything. We put a roof over your head. We tolerated your pathetic artistic phases. You went to your boss and you poisoned that investor against us. You planned this whole thing to ruin Marcus. You really think you are that important? I laughed, a genuine, cold laugh that seemed to shock them both. I didn't say a word to my CEO. I didn't have to. Your own arrogance did the work for me, Vivian. You are a bitter, miserable woman who feeds on drama because your own life is completely empty. You spent 30 years whispering poison into my parents' ears, turning them against me just so you could feel powerful. And they were stupid enough to let you do it. My father lunged forward, his hand raised. I don't know if he was going to grab my shirt or try to strike me, but the second he moved, I stepped into his space, invading it, closing the distance until we were inches apart. Do it? I whispered, my voice laced with pure, unadulterated menace. Touch me. See what happens. I am not a terrified 16-year-old boy anymore, Dad. I am a grown man. You lay one finger on me, I will have you arrested for assault, I will file a restraining order, and I will make sure it makes the front page of the local paper right alongside Marcus's ethics investigation. His hand froze in mid-air. The absolute certainty in my eyes terrified him. The ultimate bully had finally met a boundary he couldn't punch his way through. His arm slowly dropped to his side. The fight drained out of him, leaving behind a hollow, aging man. You are no son of mine. My father spat, his voice trembling with a mixture of rage and defeat. That is the best thing you have ever said to me, I replied instantly. Suddenly, a third voice cut through the tension. Richard, stop it. Just stop it. I looked past my father. Stepping out of the driver's side of the SUV was Qley, Marcus's wife. I hadn't even noticed she was in the car. Qley had always been the quiet one, the beautiful trophy wife who kept her head down and never engaged in the family cruelty, but never stopped it either. She walked over, her face pale but her jaw set with determination. She looked at my father, then at Aunt Vivian with utter disgust. Marcus is at home having a complete mental breakdown, Qley said, her voice shaking but firm. And instead of helping him, you two drove down here to harass Ethan. Is sick. Evelyn Harrison was right. This family is sick. Qley, stay out of this, Aunt Vivian snapped. No, Vivian, you stay out of my marriage, Qley yelled, finally snapping. 30 years of country club manners vanished in an instant. I have sat at 100 family dinners watching you people torture this man. I stayed quiet because Marcus told me to. But no more. Ethan didn't ruin Marcus's career. You did. You raised Marcus to be an arrogant, cruel bully, just like you, Richard. She turned to me. There were tears in her eyes. Ethan, I am so sorry. I am sorry I never defended you. You were the only decent person in this entire bloodline. She turned back to my father. If Marcus doesn't get into intensive psychiatric therapy by the end of the week, I am filing for divorce, and I am taking full custody of the kids. I will not let you turn my sons into monsters. She turned around, got back into the SUV, and slammed the door. My father stood there, completely paralyzed. The empire had officially crumbled. The golden child was disgraced. The submissive daughter-in-law was threatening divorce, and the scapegoat had become untouchable. I looked at my father and my aunt one last time. I didn't feel angry anymore. I just felt a profound sense of pity for them. They were trapped in a prison of their own making, surrounded by the wreckage of the relationships they had destroyed. Don't ever come near my home or my office again, I said calmly. I turned my back on them. I walked to my car, got in, and drove away. I looked in the rearview mirror one time. They were still standing on the sidewalk, two small, irrelevant figures fading into the distance. The villain's reign was over, and my life was finally beginning. Healing is not a linear process. It doesn't happen overnight just because you win the argument or because karma finally cashes the check. Healing is quiet. It is the slow, deliberate process of rewiring your brain to understand that you are inherently valuable, regardless of what your bloodline told you. A full year passed. 365 days without a single toxic family group chat. Without a single passive-aggressive Thanksgiving dinner. Without the suffocating weight of my father's disappointment. It was the fourth Thursday of November, Thanksgiving Day. I was standing in the kitchen of my new house, a beautiful, modern mid-century home I had purchased myself in a quiet neighborhood in Scottsdale. The air smelled like roasted turkey, fresh rosemary, and warm apple pie. The sounds filling the house weren't the sharp, biting criticisms of Aunt Vivian or the booming, arrogant laughter of my dad. The house was filled with the sound of genuine joy. I walked out of the kitchen carrying a tray of appetizers into the living room. Sarah was sitting on the couch, laughing hysterically at a story Tyler, my assistant, who had become a close friend, was telling. David, my old mentor, was sitting by the fireplace, pouring a glass of wine for Catherine, my CEO, who had graciously accepted my invitation to dinner. This was my chosen family, a family built on mutual respect, professional admiration, and unconditional support. As I set the tray down on the coffee table, I looked around the room. I felt a deep, overwhelming sense of peace. I had spent so much of my life trying to force a square peg into a round hole, trying to make people love me who simply did not have the capacity to do so. Now, surrounded by people who celebrated my successes instead of feeling threatened by them, I realized exactly what family was actually supposed to mean. Earlier that morning, I had walked down to my mailbox. Mixed in with the catalogs and bills was a single, thick envelope. The handwriting on the front was unmistakable. It was rigid, architectural, and precise. It was my father's handwriting. I had taken the envelope into my home office, sitting at my desk to open it. I didn't feel the old panic. My heart rate stayed perfectly steady. Inside was a handwritten letter on heavy stock paper. Ethan, I know you don't want to hear from me, and I will respect your boundaries. I am not writing this to ask for an invitation, or to demand that we speak. I am writing this because I have spent the last year in a quiet house, watching everything I built fall apart, and I finally realize why. Marcus is in intensive therapy. Qley stayed with him, but it is a difficult road. He is learning how to be a man without using someone else as a stepping stone. And I am trying to learn how to be a father. I failed you, completely and utterly. I let my own insecurities, my own rigid view of the world, blind me to the incredible man you became. I listened to Vivian instead of listening to my own heart. I have cut Vivian out of our lives. It was the hardest but most necessary thing I have ever done. I don't expect your forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But before I leave this earth, I needed to put these words on paper, so you have them forever. You are a brilliant, strong, and successful man. I am incredibly proud of you, Ethan, and I am so profoundly sorry that I read the letter twice. I traced the words, "I am proud of you," with my fingertip. It was the exact sentence I had spent 32 years dying to hear. It was the holy grail of my childhood. And yet, reading it now, it didn't magically fix the past. It didn't erase the pain, but it did provide closure. I took the letter, folded it carefully, and placed it inside the bottom drawer of my desk. I didn't throw it away, but I didn't frame it either. I accepted his apology internally. I forgave him not for his sake, but for my own. Holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. I released the resentment. But forgiveness does not mean reconciliation. I didn't pick up the phone to call him. I didn't invite him over. I maintained the boundary I had fought so hard to establish. Maybe one day, years from now, we could have a cup of coffee. But for now, my peace was too expensive to gamble with. I walked back into the living room, pulling myself out of the memory of the letter. Sarah looked up at me from the couch, a knowing smile on her face. She raised her glass of wine toward me. "To Ethan," she said, her voice clear and bright. the man of the hour, and to the best damn Thanksgiving this house has ever seen. The entire room raised their glasses. To Ethan, they echoed. I raised my own glass, taking a sip of the red wine. Tasted like victory. I looked out the large glass windows of my living room, watching the Arizona sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple. I had survived the fire. I had torn down the toxic foundations of my past and built a magnificent skyscraper on top of the ruins. I am 33 years old now. I am successful, I am loved, and most importantly, I am free. Have you ever faced something similar with your own family? Have you ever had to walk away from the people who were supposed to love you the most in order to save yourself? Share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next journey.